My child, do not move past this moment too quickly. Something has been pressing against the silence around you, something your heart may have sensed before your mind could understand it. You did not arrive here by accident within this story. There is a truth sitting between you and the person your soul keeps returning to, and that truth has almost been spoken more than once. They have carried it to the edge of their lips, rehearsed it when no one was listening, imagined your face when you finally heard it, and then pulled it back into the hidden place where they keep the words they are most afraid to lose control of. But tonight, the silence around that truth is beginning to crack. There is something your soulmate wants to tell you, and the reason they have not said it yet is not what you think. You may have wondered whether their silence meant distance. You may have questioned whether the pauses, the mixed signals, the strange moments of warmth followed by withdrawal were signs that their feelings had changed. But there is a difference between someone becoming empty and someone becoming overwhelmed. There is a difference between a heart that no longer cares and a heart that cares so deeply it becomes afraid of what honesty might set into motion. Your soulmate is standing in that second place. They are not fighting an absence of feeling. They are fighting the consequences of finally admitting what those feelings have become. And this is where the story becomes more complicated. They know that once they tell you the truth, they cannot return to the version of your connection that existed before. They know some truths do not simply enter a conversation and disappear. Some truths rearrange everything. They change the way two people look at each other. They make old memories mean something different. They expose why certain moments felt heavier than they should have. They turn coincidence into possibility. Your soulmate understands this, and that is why the confession they are carrying has begun to feel larger than words. There was a moment recently when they almost told you. Maybe you will never know exactly when it happened, but imagine them alone after a long day, staring at your name, thinking about sending a message that would have changed the emotional temperature between you instantly. Their fingers hovered. A sentence formed. They deleted it. Another sentence came. That one disappeared too. Finally, they put the phone down and told themselves they would find a better time. But the truth is, they were not waiting for a better time. They were waiting for courage. Because what they want to tell you is connected to a fear they have rarely admitted, even to themselves. They are afraid that if they reveal everything, you may finally understand just how much power your presence has had over their emotional world. They have tried to appear composed. They have tried to act normal. They may have even convinced people around them that whatever exists between you is simple, manageable, or easy to ignore. Yet beneath that surface, something completely different has been unfolding. Your name has entered rooms you were never in. Your memory has interrupted conversations you never heard. The thought of you has followed them home. There are songs they cannot hear the same way anymore. There are places that suddenly remind them of moments involving you. There are ordinary evenings when the world becomes quiet and your face rises in their mind with such clarity that they wonder why they are still pretending this connection has not changed them. And that is only the beginning. They have been asking themselves a question they never expected to ask: what if this is real enough to risk everything familiar? That question frightens them because they have spent a long time learning how to survive without needing too much from anyone. Somewhere in their past, trust became complicated. Maybe someone promised permanence and disappeared. Maybe someone made them feel foolish for caring deeply. Maybe they learned to hide their tenderness because vulnerability was not always handled gently. Whatever the story, they became skilled at protecting the parts of themselves that mattered most. Then you appeared. And you did not necessarily break through those walls with dramatic gestures. In some ways, that would have been easier for them to understand. Instead, you reached places inside them through small things. A look. A conversation. The way you listened. The way your energy lingered after an interaction ended. The way something about you made them feel seen without forcing them to explain every hidden piece of themselves. That frightened them more than they expected. Because when someone has spent years controlling what others are allowed to see, being understood can feel almost dangerous. So they began doing something strange. They started hiding more precisely because they cared more deeply. That may sound impossible, but human hearts often protect what they value by pretending it does not matter. Your soulmate began editing themselves around you. They swallowed questions they wanted to ask. They restrained affection that wanted to surface naturally. They told themselves not to read too much into moments that kept repeating. They tried to build logical explanations for emotional experiences that did not feel logical at all. But every attempt to reduce this connection made it louder. And heaven watched the contradiction unfold. The more they tried not to think about you, the more you appeared in their thoughts. The more they tried to create emotional distance, the more meaningful your absence became. The more they convinced themselves they could remain silent, the more unbearable that silence felt. Something inside them has reached a threshold. This is why their energy may feel different now, even inside this fictional spiritual story. The part of them that was once satisfied with hiding has become restless. They are beginning to understand that avoiding a truth does not erase it. It only forces the truth to speak through other things. Through hesitation, through jealousy they do not want to admit, through unexpected tenderness, through sudden silence when your name is mentioned, through the strange ache they feel when imagining you choosing a life where they are no longer emotionally significant. That last thought has been haunting them. They have pictured you moving forward without ever knowing what they wanted to say. They have imagined someone else arriving with the courage they kept postponing. They have imagined you giving another person the chance they were too afraid to ask for. And something inside them breaks a little every time that possibility becomes vivid. Not because they believe they own your future. They do not. But because they know they have been standing at the door of honesty while pretending they cannot hear it opening. There is a particular truth they keep circling, and it is more vulnerable than a simple declaration of affection. Yes, feelings are involved. Deep feelings. But there is something beneath those feelings that makes the confession harder. They want you to know not only that they care, but that their connection with you has forced them to confront something unfinished within themselves. You became a mirror. Not the kind that reflects appearance. The kind that reflects emotional truth. Through you, they began seeing how often fear has made decisions for them. How often they chose silence because silence could not reject them. How often they called emotional distance peace, when it was really protection. How many times they convinced themselves that wanting someone was dangerous simply because wanting meant they could lose. You did not create those fears, but your presence exposed them. And now they are standing at an inner crossroads. One path allows them to remain protected, composed, and forever wondering. The other path asks them to tell you the truth. That is why they have been restless. There are nights when they imagine the conversation in detail. They imagine sitting across from you or hearing your voice. They imagine beginning carefully, perhaps with ordinary words, because the real ones feel too enormous to say immediately. They think about watching your expression change as you realize this is not a casual conversation. Then, in their imagination, everything spills out. They tell you why they pulled away at moments when they wanted to move closer. They tell you why certain messages took too long to send. They tell you why they sometimes became quieter after meaningful moments between you. They tell you that those moments affected them far more than they allowed you to see. They tell you that their distance was not always disinterest. Sometimes it was fear wearing the mask of control. Sometimes it was emotion becoming too strong to manage. Sometimes it was the terrifying awareness that you were becoming important. But there is another part. And this is the part they have not figured out how to explain. They are carrying regret. Not the dramatic kind that destroys everything. A quieter kind. The kind that appears when someone looks back and realizes they had opportunities to be honest but chose safety instead. They remember things they wish they had said differently. They remember moments when you may have needed clarity and they gave you uncertainty. They remember times when their actions could have made you question your importance. And they know that if they tell you the full truth, they must also acknowledge that their fear may have caused confusion. That is difficult for them. Because apologizing would require them to admit that you mattered all along. And once they admit that, the emotional disguise disappears. My child, there is a reason this fictional message has found you through a title about truth rather than simply love. Love can be felt privately. Truth requires movement. Truth requires someone to cross the space between what they feel and what they are willing to reveal. Your soulmate is approaching that space now. Something has happened inside them recently. It may not have been dramatic from the outside. It could have been a conversation with someone close to them. It could have been a quiet realization after seeing something that reminded them of you. It could have been the uncomfortable awareness that time keeps moving even when courage does not. Whatever the trigger, they suddenly saw the danger of waiting too long. And that realization disturbed them. Because they have been acting as though there will always be another opportunity. Another day. Another conversation. Another perfect moment. But life does not promise perfect openings. Sometimes the moment arrives disguised as an ordinary evening. Sometimes the sentence must be spoken while the speaker is still afraid. Sometimes courage is not the absence of trembling. It is telling the truth with trembling hands. Your soulmate is beginning to understand this. And now a question has entered their mind that they cannot dismiss. What if you already believe the wrong thing about their silence? That possibility has unsettled them deeply. They wonder if you interpreted their hesitation as rejection. They wonder if you stopped expecting honesty from them. They wonder if you began emotionally protecting yourself because they gave you no reason to believe they would ever become clear. And perhaps the hardest thought of all is this: they wonder whether they waited so long that you have begun releasing what they were finally preparing to confess. This is where their urgency comes from. Not pressure. Not possession. Urgency. The awareness that meaningful things can be lost through endless hesitation. So they have begun preparing differently. The words are becoming more specific. Before, they imagined vague admissions. Now they are thinking about details. They want to tell you when their feelings first changed. They want to explain the exact moment they realized you were no longer just another person in their life. And that moment may surprise you. It was not necessarily the obvious moment. It may not have been your most romantic conversation. It may not have happened when you looked your best or said something unforgettable. It may have happened during something almost insignificant. Perhaps you showed them kindness when you had nothing to gain. Perhaps you remembered something they assumed everyone would forget. Perhaps you respected a boundary instead of pushing through it. Perhaps you made them laugh during a moment when they were secretly carrying something heavy. Whatever happened, something in them went still. They noticed you differently. And from that moment onward, part of them began paying attention. Not obsessively. Quietly. The way someone notices sunrise after realizing they have spent too many mornings looking at the ground. They began collecting little pieces of you in memory. The way you respond when something matters. The way your energy changes when you are protecting your heart. The way you become quieter when disappointed. The way you show care without always announcing it. And slowly, the picture they had of you became deeper. That depth is what frightened them. Because attraction can be dismissed. Curiosity can fade. But emotional recognition is harder to escape. They started seeing qualities in you that matched needs they had stopped admitting they possessed. Safety. Warmth. Strength without cruelty. Tenderness without weakness. Presence without pressure. Something about you made them imagine a version of themselves that was less guarded. And that image became dangerous to the identity they had built around self-protection. So they resisted. But resistance has consequences. When a person resists what they genuinely feel, they often become inconsistent. Close one day. Distant the next. Open in one moment. Unreadable in another. You may have sensed this contradiction. And perhaps part of you became tired of interpreting it. That matters, because the truth they want to tell you includes an admission they know you deserve to hear. You were not imagining everything. There were moments when the connection genuinely deepened. There were times when they felt the same emotional shift you felt. There were conversations they replayed. There were words from you they carried longer than you knew. There were moments of silence where they wanted to say much more. Yet this does not mean every uncertainty should become a promise. It means something more grounded and more powerful. Behind some of the confusion was a person trying to understand feelings they were not prepared to reveal. And now that person is running out of excuses. They can feel it. The old explanations no longer satisfy them. I need more time. What if I misunderstand everything? What if it changes our connection? What if I look foolish? Those fears still exist, but another fear has grown larger. What if staying silent hurts more than speaking? That is the question changing everything. And somewhere inside them, an answer is forming. They know silence is beginning to cost them peace. They cannot keep pretending your place in their emotional world is smaller than it is. They cannot keep acting indifferent while secretly wondering what you are thinking. They cannot keep hoping you somehow understand a truth they have never clearly spoken. Sooner or later, they must choose. And, my child, they have already started leaning toward one direction. Honesty. But before that honesty arrives, something else must happen. They have to forgive themselves for being afraid. This may seem small, but it is not. People sometimes delay important conversations because they are ashamed they delayed them in the first place. Every passing day makes the confession feel more complicated. They begin asking, how do I explain why I waited? Then they wait longer because they cannot answer that question, creating an even larger distance between truth and expression. Your soulmate has been caught in this cycle. They wanted to speak. Then they felt embarrassed that they had waited. Then they waited more. Then the truth became heavier. Now they are realizing there may never be an elegant explanation. Maybe the explanation is simply this. I was scared. Not poetic. Not impressive. Just human. They were scared because you mattered. Scared because honesty could change things. Scared because once you knew, they could no longer hide behind ambiguity. Scared because your answer would become real. And real answers can either open doors or close them. But there is a strange freedom arriving inside them now. They are beginning to understand that your response belongs to you. Their responsibility is not to control your reaction. Their responsibility is to finally become truthful. That realization has given them a courage they did not possess before. There is another layer, though. Your soulmate has not only been hiding how they feel. They have also been hiding something about how deeply they have been thinking about the future. Not a complete plan. Not a fantasy carved in stone. But possibilities. They have imagined what it would be like if communication between you became honest. They have imagined seeing you without having to measure every word. They have imagined giving you the version of themselves that does not disappear emotionally when things become meaningful. They have imagined what would happen if they stopped fighting the connection and simply allowed it to reveal what it truly is. And those possibilities have affected them. They have felt hope. That may be the emotion they fear most. Because disappointment is painful, but hope requires opening the door before you know who will walk through it. For a guarded heart, hope can feel like surrender. Yet they are beginning to surrender anyway. Not to a guarantee. To truth. There is something sacred about that. Not because every relationship becomes permanent. Not because every soulmate story must end in the same way. But because truth gives two people the dignity of knowing where they actually stand. And your soulmate is beginning to recognize that withholding truth does not protect both of you. It only protects uncertainty. They no longer want uncertainty to be the strongest voice between you. This is why you may soon notice a shift. Perhaps their communication becomes more intentional. Perhaps they ask a question that seems simple but carries emotional weight. Perhaps they bring up an old memory. Perhaps they become unusually serious. Perhaps they begin with a sentence that sounds ordinary before suddenly revealing the conversation they have been preparing for. Something like, "There is something I should have told you a long time ago." And when that moment comes, they may pause. Not because they changed their mind. Because the truth will be standing at the doorway. They will feel everything at once. Relief. Fear. Hope. Regret. Tenderness. And the strange vulnerability of finally allowing you to see what silence was hiding. But there is one piece of the truth they are even more afraid to tell you. This is the part they keep saving for last in every imaginary conversation. The part that makes their chest tighten whenever they rehearse it. Because telling you they care is one thing. Telling you how much your presence changed them is another. They want to admit that you reached them during a time when they had almost stopped believing anyone could. They want to tell you that something inside them had become tired before you came into their emotional world. Tired of disappointment. Tired of pretending they needed nothing. Tired of carrying old wounds with a smile. Then somehow, without knowing the full battle happening inside them, you reminded them that tenderness still existed. That connection was still possible. That being understood did not always have to end in pain. And this is why the truth has become so enormous. Because you are not only tied to their feelings. You are tied to their awakening. That does not make you responsible for healing them. Their healing belongs to them. But your presence became a turning point. And they are afraid that telling you this will sound like too much. So they keep softening the words. Then strengthening them. Then deleting them. Then imagining them again. They are trying to find a way to tell you something that cannot be made small. And tonight, within this unfolding story, something has shifted again. A memory returned to them. A specific memory involving you. At first, it seemed ordinary. Then they realized something they had never allowed themselves to fully admit about that moment. They realized that was the day the connection changed for them. That was the moment their heart stopped treating you like someone temporary. And once they recognized that, another memory surfaced. Then another. Pieces began connecting. Things they had dismissed suddenly formed a pattern. Their reactions. Their hesitation. Their jealousy. Their protectiveness. Their need to know you were okay. Their strange sadness whenever distance grew between you. It all pointed toward the same truth. They have been emotionally deeper in this connection than they allowed themselves to acknowledge. And now there is nowhere left inside them to hide from that realization. But the final truth is not simply, "I care about you." No. There is something they discovered after connecting those memories, something that explains why they kept pulling back at the exact moments they wanted to move closer. They finally understood what they were truly afraid of. And when they understood it, they became emotional because the answer was not rejection. It was not timing. It was not another person. It was not even the past. It was something much more personal. Something connected to the possibility of losing you after finally allowing themselves to believe you could matter permanently. And there is a sentence they have been preparing to tell you, a sentence they have never said aloud before. They have repeated the beginning of it in their mind again and again. I need you to know why I kept stopping myself. But every time they reach the next words, their voice disappears. Because the next part reveals the one thing they have protected more fiercely than anything else. And when you hear what that is, every confusing moment between you may suddenly begin to make sense.